I remember being late in the airport at Paris, and over the mic it was saying, "Madame Hippolite, please get to the gate." And I thought, who are they talking about? Of course, I discovered they were talking about me, and the reason I'm referencing that is because that's how complex our histories are. The Hippolites, my husband's family, came in just before the Treaty of 1840 was signed, had a couple of liaisons, and so we have a very dark-coloured Hippolite family, and we have a very light-coloured Hippolite family. And what I was struck about in coming to Australia is that our histories are interesting and complex, and they are shaping the dialogue that we have continued to have today. Because much of what we've traversed in the last couple of days is about human experience. And the human experiences are creating collisions, they're creating conflict, and they are creating opportunity to imagine something else than what we have seen. But I want to pay homage to the proposition of day one about remembering, because we don't remember much about Charles Baron Hippolyte de Thierry, who came to Aotearoa, because that's just a part of our history. We've thought it didn't matter, because what matters is what we do at home in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But as I think I can speak for our New Zealand colleagues, as we listen to your questions here in Australia, as we listen to the way you talk about what this means in your country, Commonwealth or state, you have some complexities that we haven't quite, I think, got a grasp for, because we have 2 degrees of separation. Most of the New Zealanders here, we know each other professionally and in a family context. We know we are related to somebody by 2 degrees. And I think that is a feature of our size, that we are able to maintain a network and a connection in a way that means we know who's going to challenge the thought and the theory of what it means to be a colonised nation. The thought and the theory that Marcia challenged us with all the rhetoric of how poor the outcomes look for our people. The network that we have in Aotearoa is so small and yet so big. And so I've been a bit struck by that. I've seen this many a time when I've come to Australia, but the stark challenges that exist have a unique dimension. We have them in Aotearoa, but there is, because of country, just something quite unique about that. The Hippolyte family have a really great opportunity to look after the tuatara in the top of the south. We have one island that's dedicated to our tuatara, our dinosaurs of Aotearoa, have lived for a very long time. And as kaitiaki of the tuatara, one of the interesting facts about this creature is that he and she shed their skin every year. So they have to get ready to adapt to whatever the environmental challenges might be. And if they keep having lots of babies, they start to eat themselves. And so every now and then the tuatara are redistributed across Aotearoa so that actually we can keep that population of animal alive, but so that they don't eat each other. And so I want to pick up 2 themes from what happens to the tuatara. And the first one is about how we have to continue to adapt to the challenging environments that we face. The political, geographical, the agency, the relationships we have in government and with our communities across the country mean that our preparedness to adapt, to re-strategise and reimagine can't wait for the long story. Now, interestingly, I was listening to some side commentary as some of us who were on panels talked about the long game that we're in. And I too use that phraseology, it's a long game. then I realised some of us were saying, well, it might be a long game, but we actually need to get something done tomorrow, not wait for next year or the next election. How can we all be the agents of change because we can't wait for tomorrow? So our windows, we know in a political context, are 3 to 4 years, and our obligation to get ready to adapt to the environment before we shed our skin is really important. Some of the tuatara have 3 eyes, these 2, and then one in the middle. That enables them to look around and see what else is going on. And so I've got a few call to actions, which is related to the 3rd eye. And I'm going to use the phraseology of imagine to talk to each of the things that I think we've traversed while we've been here the last couple of days. The first one, of course, is I. And my colleagues have talked about the insight that we have been able to talk with each other about. My call to action for each of us is to find ways to share insight on different platforms. My colleague talked about digital platforms being a vehicle. Some of us have been left behind in this digital revolution, and sometimes I don't like it. Sometimes I don't think the digital platform promotes good values. Sometimes I think it makes people do stupid things, say things that they actually don't mean, but it's too late because they've pushed the button. Nonetheless, I think it's an opportunity for our insight to be made more accessible to our own communities and to others. There is much richness in the intelligence in this audience, and I think as we pull together as a collective, our capacity to talk about what is great, but actually what is hard and how we've found our way through that, there is, and I know some have already gone home, but I think the potential here to talk about those stories that act as a bridge between the past into the present and what it might mean for the future is actually in our hands. Next letter is M. I think we've found mates. So mates are only as good as the energy that we put into those relationships, and we're again traversing that. But I use the term mate or auntie, brother, sister, whanaunga as we would say at home, because we should maximise our mateship to turn relationships into something that is more than seeing each other every now and then. The impact of a wider collective network is something that we saw when the rugby league game happened. The symbolism of that rugby league game where 2 Indigenous peoples turned up, dressed, doing their thing and ready to go, I think was more than just a rugby game. And there's something in mateship that comes between us and our 2 countries. A for action. We do a lot of talking, many of us do. We have a saying at home, less hui and more doing. Less talking, more action. So my call to action for all of us is, it doesn't have to be huge. Take a nugget, make a difference, talk to somebody else about it, and spread the movement of us imagining what a public service can be when it understands indigeneity. G for gains. All of us live in this narrative of the socio-economic demise of our people. I call it the misery story. I'm intolerant of it. I think, let's talk about the possibility story, what the potential looks like. But, we don't measure potential, we measure misery. We've got to find different ways. And the conversation in the data workshop, which I didn't attend, but I know that is about what is possible, what gets measured, what gets collected, and how do we turn it into actual insights that take our narrative from misery to possibility. And I'd like to think I'm joining with community, academics, and those of the public service to be part of that movement about the big indigeneity concepts that exist in both of our countries. Nearly there. As I was saying, I don't doubt that we're all intellectually able. I hope that we're all clever. And clever for me means you combine not only what you learn in your head, but you do bring that heart and that spiritual dimension to your engagement and your work. I heard one of the aunties say that, gee, some people might think that's a bit cuckoo. I don't think that's cuckoo. I think that for me is Māori. But not everybody understands that, so that is our challenge. How do we bring insight to say, this is a pathway to possibility, not to stay in misery? And for New Zealand, I think we've got some thinking to do at home. We have started to think about what does the public sector have to do to deliver better for Māori. So that's a wero to us, that's a challenge to us, call to action. And I'm going to undertake in front of my colleagues to pull a few of them together so that we can think about how we can talk about what we've experienced here in ANZSOG and in previous conferences to maintain momentum rather than just wait for the next conference. And Eve, the last part of Imagine, I reckon we have to enjoy ourselves. If what you do is a drag, then you're in the wrong job. This stuff gives us grey hair. It's given me grey hair. I never started dyeing my hair till I became a chief executive. But we have to enjoy what we're doing, and I don't doubt the passion that we all have. But if we start to sound like a broken record, perhaps that is time to do something else. I've not heard that here, because we all have a passion for what we're doing. So imagine, go beyond the analytics, go further than the analytics, so that we are engaging and building the bridges and helping ourselves and our colleagues to have the courageous conversations, it's called these days, and doing it with integrity and honesty, and entering those discussions with concepts that can be broken down, because words mean different things to different people, regardless of what language they're in. And so that's me. I think it's been a wonderful couple of days. I want to acknowledge my colleagues who have come from Aotearoa, New Zealand. We've had a great time. I think a number of us really enjoyed the wairua, the tempo of last night's dinner. Really struck by, I've forgotten his name already, the rugby AFL player. I didn't expect that much honesty. I didn't expect somebody to speak truly to what his experience was. And as those who work with communities, I reckon people can see whether we're being honest or not, and because our language depicts that in the way we convey our thoughts. Been very inspired by all of the panellists here and in the small rooms. Very diverse, actually. Most of the panels have been very diverse from one end of the spectrum to another. But this format of having time to talk together, to hear different perspectives, either from our two countries and our American colleagues, awesome. And so it's given us much food for thought. At home, we would thank the organisers, which grateful to ANZSOG, as well as our chartered accountants from Australia and New Zealand. Hope you picked up your torch. And we'd also thank the cooks, even though they're the hired help. What we eat and drink brings us sustenance to keep our minds going during the 2 days. So I want to acknowledge all the ringaropa, all the ones with the red t-shirts on. We know in organising these events that nothing can happen without people like those wearing the red t-shirts. So I want to acknowledge all your patience, guidance. I was hoping we weren't going to have a fire because I don't know how the heck we were going to get out that small door. So not only do we come, not only has our minds and hearts been sustained over these last couple of days, we've been supported to have a good experience and a great experience that really means our call to action and the call for each of us to think about is, what are we going to do to keep the magic going? Kia ora tātou.